fundamentally done. Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, frankly, anybody in the Democrat Party at this point. And we see more and more young people who find the socialist mentality alluring. A decade of indoctrination from middle school and high school into college, if they go to college. Indoctrination in the media, indoctrination in Hollywood. Socialism becomes cool. So we need to take a moment. I hope particularly you young people out there will just stick with me a little while. We need to get into this. And we need to really get into this. And we need to start pounding away on this. Or we're not only going to lose this election, we're going to lose the next generation. Only we can get them back. And it is our duty as parents and grandparents to do exactly that. Don't just send them off to school, or in the case of college, off to college and universities. And what will be, will be. No. What will be, won't be. What we're talking about here is government control versus market control. Government control versus market control, and I will explain those in a moment. Notice Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton don't do what the old leftist Marxists used to do, talk about nationalizing industries. That's just a step too far for most people. Flat out nationalization of industries. So that's been rejected. But there's this growing support for something called socialism. They can't even really define socialism. They don't really know what socialism is. It's ambiguous as a term. It's just generally collectivism. And it's anti-capitalism. And it's driven by elites and pseudo-intellectuals, not because they believe in the people. They hate the people. But they believe that they and people of their same mentality should be running society. And this isn't the first society in which this has occurred. Almost every other society has followed this route. Whether monarchies or fascism or communism or any mix. That's what it's about. A relative handful of people telling everybody else what to do. And yet they paint themselves as morally superior to us. They paint themselves as humanitarians and compassionate. And they're none of these things. They're central planners. They're social engineers. They want to use force to redistribute wealth. They want to use force to remake man. Now, these are not outcomes. When they debate, when they speak, they pretend that their demands about destroying society and our governing system, that in and of itself, that's an outcome. It's not an outcome. It's a process, and it's a destructive process. It's a system, and it's a destructive system. Centralization is a political objective. It's not a humane objective. It's not a compassionate objective. It's not a moral objective. It is a political objective. And it empowers the few. Dispersed political power, dispersed economic decision-making empowers the people. It empowers you. Now, it's all imperfect. That's not the point. Man cannot be perfect. Man's institutions cannot be perfect. But capitalism is about voluntarism. It's voluntary exchange. It's about private property. It's about free will, individual sovereignty. You have more freedom and more prosperity. It is indisputable in capitalist societies than you do in Marxist/socialist/ more totalitarian societies. More justice, more tolerance, more success, more opportunity, actually more wealth distribution but it's voluntary wealth distribution. Socialism, on the other hand, promotes a culture of jealousy, of authoritarianism, of coercion, of lawlessness, of behavior that if any individual were to conduct themselves that way, they'd wind up in a federal prison. Centralized government, let's cut to the chase, one word, is about force. It's about force. And it creates economic and political dislocation, and it creates cronyism. Cronyism. And I don't ever want to hear again that socialism or Marxism or Bernie Sanders and so forth, that these are selfless people. They're not selfless people. People who are Marxists or socialists or liberals, they're all about self-interest, just as capitalists are. The difference is your self-interest as a capitalist isn't about using government to impose your self-interest on somebody else. Socialists, Marxists, whatever you call them, I call them statists, they insist that you comply with their self-interest, that you bow to their self-interest, that you accept their self-interest. It's quite different. Capitalism promotes a culture of competition, voluntary cooperation, and it rewards success. And as I said, it creates wealth, more wealth than any other system, for more people than any other system. When we had what is as close to pure capitalism, and there is no such thing, but what is as close to pure capitalism as possible, we had these men, these industrialists, who created the Industrial Revolution. And yet, through the rewrite of history, you would think these men were evil. The men who produced automobiles, who brought electricity and light to our homes. The men who created ways of processing and refining oil and gasoline and steel. The men who were responsible for creating what Marx called, and we'll play along just so people understand, the great middle class. The great middle class was not created by government. It wasn't created by agrarianism. It wasn't created by populism. It was created by capitalism. The reason why communism, while spreading in Europe, never spread in the United States, there was no bourgeois versus proletarian in the United States. Thanks to Rockefeller and Mellon and all the rest of the people you've been taught to hate and despise. Because the real robber barons in this country are not them and were not them. The real robber barons in this country, Woodrow Wilson, Franklin Roosevelt, Lyndon Johnson, Barack Obama, Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, because they not only have the power to speak and to organize, they use the power of government and the law to impose their self-interest on all the rest of us. We're talking about centralized power exercised by ideologues. But they're only ideological in exercising their power against you. They're really quite different. You might say situational ethics when it comes to enriching themselves and enriching their friends. So you have to live under their ideology, but they don't. There's nothing compassionate or humane about statism, Marxism, socialism, liberalism. Nothing. And it's even worse. It leads to not assimilation, not unity, not tolerance in a society. It leads to balkanization and division and hate. It leads to central government manipulation of individuals and groups of individuals. Individual responsibility, on the other hand, is at the heart of capitalism. Irresponsibility is at the heart of socialism. You see, society is to blame for some individuals' failures and misconduct and immorality. It's society's fault. Irresponsibility is dismissed because the people who have conducted themselves in an irresponsible way are called victims. They're victimized by society. And so the malcontents and the miscreants and the inexperienced and the uninformed are the perfect people. The perfect people to be drawn into those who promote socialism. A culture of individual immorality is what socialism promotes. And where the government acts in ways that would be criminal if the individual acted the same way, it's praised as humane and compassionate. Socialism steals. It robs. It uses force. It penalizes. It imprisons. And this attitude and mindset spreads into the rest of the culture and society, far beyond economics. Free speech becomes less free. Thinking is replaced with groupthink. Fundamental, unalienable rights must be surrendered or seized for the good of the whole. Strawmen are created. Certain industries, certain people, even certain religious or ethnic groups are held up to ridicule. And it can get out of control, as it has in many societies, because they become targets. They become targets. But let's look at the economic outcomes that are supposed to manifest as a result of socialism versus capitalism. By every measure, socialism is inferior. And by most measures, socialism is a failure. The first thing the left does in this country is they point to Social Security. There could be no Social Security if there's no capitalism. How is Social Security at least theoretically funded? By employers and employees. If you don't have employers and employees, if you don't have a robust, relatively free market economic system, you cannot have a Social Security system that is sound. It collapses of its own weight. The government doesn't create wealth. The government doesn't create opportunity. The government redistributes forcibly. And so you pay into a system today where people benefit far beyond what they've ever paid into it. But future generations will be crushed by it because it can't keep up with what the socialist demands, what the socialist coerces. I'm just using this as an example. There are literally thousands of examples in our local, state, and federal levels, and in our households, and in businesses, and in workplaces throughout this country. I'll be right back. So picking up where I left off, the left has an advantage in this debate because people who are born into relative freedom, too many people who are born into relative freedom do not understand the consequences of surrendering it. It's just a matter of watching TV, things going on over there, things going on. That could never happen here. And the demagoguery that comes from a person like Bernie Sanders plays on that. So what he talks about really is the perfectibility of man, the perfectibility of government programs, radical egalitarianism, equality across the board. And you know what's interesting? No matter what the society that has promoted that, Mao's China, Stalin's Soviet Union, Zimbabwe, you name it, even at the tip of a sword and with a bullet, they can never achieve it. Why what took place in Philadelphia in 1787 is so important. This is why what took place before that, 1776, is so important. This is why what took place in 1775 in Boston was so important. This is why what took place for about 200 years, we call it the Enlightenment in France and Britain and Germany, is so important. Because mankind has evolved through the Enlightenment, through Reformation. Mankind has evolved. Socialism, Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, all of they're throwbacks. They're pre-Enlightenment. They're pre-American Revolution. It's another form of monarchy, except it's more vile. It has an indoctrination quality to it. It seeps through society like nothing before. And this is all taught by Marx and Engels, as I wrote about in Emeritopia at great length, and we've talked about here before. Bernie Sanders says, no, I'm not a socialist, I'm a democratic socialist. Oh, really? A democratic socialist. And yet he hates the democratic part. Bernie Sanders is an iron-fisted Marxist. He might be an older man. He might have a smile. He doesn't even do that, actually. He's quite dour. You may think he's harmless. He's a crackpot. But Marx was a crackpot. Stalin was a crackpot. Mao was a crackpot. They're all crackpots. Castro's a crackpot. The nut job in Venezuela, he was a crackpot. Show me anywhere on the face of the earth where socialism has spread individual liberty. Show me. Where people are free to pursue their interests, where people are free to pursue enterprises, to accumulate private property. And oh, capitalism is so horrible. Capitalism, which has improved the lives of billions and billions of people, not only here, but all over the world. With new drugs, new technologies, new products, new services, new inventions. That's what we want. On the economic side, it also promotes what? Tolerance. It also promotes neighborliness. You have to get along with people if you are going to have voluntary interactions with them. If you're going to need them to purchase what you want, or going to persuade them to a particular viewpoint. And when you layer on top of that faith, churches and synagogues, among other faiths, this is what we mean when we talk about Americanism, when we talk about conservatism, when we talk about constitutionalism. The whole point of the Constitution is to keep centralized government in a box, giving it certain limited authority. And outside the box, we are free as a people to pursue that which is in our own interests, as long as it's moral and as long as it doesn't create some crime. Not to be rejiggering society, socially engineering human nature, socially engineering our economic system. Some crackpot who was mayor of a small town in Vermont is going to determine what the entire future of the country is going to look like. He's going to reach into our homes, our communities, our businesses, our workplaces, our unions, whatever. He's going to reach in and decide for us what's best and what isn't. Based on what? What is it based on? Seriously. We've seen the likes of Bernie Sanders before. We've seen the likes of Hillary Clinton before. What we want are leaders who respect their limitations. What we want are leaders who respect our liberty. And what we want are leaders who, when they put their hand on the Bible and put their other hand in the air and swear an oath to the Constitution, mean it. And Bernie Sanders doesn't mean it. Hillary Clinton doesn't mean it. The Democrat Party is the party of tyranny. The Democrat Party, its members, its leaders, wittingly or unwittingly in the case of its followers, have a totalitarian mindset. They live in the greatest nation on the face of the earth, not because of Barack Obama, not because of LBJ or JFK or any of the other alphabet soup. They live on the greatest nation on the face of the earth because of we the people. And they don't believe it. Or if they do, they don't care. Remember we talked about self-interest? How capitalists are accused of operating in self-interest? Nobody operates with a greater demand that their own interests be promoted and imposed on society than the left. And you have to ask yourselves, ultimately, where will they take us? Over all the years I've been behind this microphone, and long before that, I've asked the same question, and they can't answer it. Can you show us your blueprint? What kind of government is it that you want us to have in the end? What kind of industries are good industries? What kind of industries are bad industries? Where do you want to take us? What's too much wealth and income? Too little wealth and income? When will we know that we're no longer racist? When will we know? When will we get to this utopia? China hasn't gotten to it. Despite all the long marches, despite the cleansing of society, of all the people who opposed the great paradise that Mao wanted to put in place, Russia and the old Soviet Union, they couldn't get there, despite Stalin wiping out 30, 40, 50 million people who he believed were in the way of this paradise. Cuba, political gulags populate that island. Look at the paradise down there with their 1957 Chevys. They don't have any healthcare system down there. Look at Venezuela, once one of the wealthiest nations in South America because of its oil. Now one of the poorest. You can't even get toilet paper in Venezuela. Chavez's children are billionaires. The former bus driver who took over for Chavez after he died, he's a billionaire. It's a police state where the soldiers and the police are taken care of and the people suffer. But you liberals should be happy. Look at all the radical egalitarianism going on there. Look at it. The masses, this is what the left likes to call the people, the masses are just that. They're masses. And they struggle every day just to survive. And they exist not to advance their own livelihoods, not to advance their own families. They exist to serve the state. Period. And if they dare to speak up in objection, they disappear. They disappear. This is why, if you have a candidate running for president of the United States who says conservatism is part of the problem, you should be very wary of that candidate in the Republican Party. Trump the other day said conservatives are part of the problem. Really? Since Reagan, when have conservatives run a damn thing in the federal government? Conservatives are the problem? You've had many of his surrogates, and not just his, others, dismiss the constitutionalists. Oh, they're theoreticians. Not theoreticians. This is about life and liberty, the pursuit of happiness. It's about private property rights. See, we do have a design. That's the design. Where government is limited and everything outside the government box, people can pursue their greatness, their success, without limit. Again, if they're law-abiding and moral people. The American Revolution was unique in this regard. See, we never had a king. Oh, we had a king in England, but we never had a king in the Americas. America is also unique in that we've never had communism per se in America. We've never had fascism per se in America. We've been a very, very blessed people. And yet there are people in this country, elitists, pseudo-intellectuals, where we run our children through the grinder, through the mill, where they indoctrinate them, where they brainwash them, where they demand groupthink, where they punish those who dare to think outside the socialist box, the Marxist box, the statist box. And so when we have candidates that promote tyranny and are the totalitarian mindset, we need to confront them. We need to educate our children and grandchildren. We need to take them under our arms and explain things to them. One story after another, how young people are moving towards socialism because you and I aren't doing enough. And then you look at the Republican side. We actually have, for the first time since Ronald Reagan, the first time since Ronald Reagan, an unequivocal constitutional conservative. That's why he's hated by the Washington, D.C. crowd. That's why he's hated by academics. That's why he's hated by the media. That's why he's hated within the Republican Party ruling class establishment. They'll take anybody over Ted Cruz. They'll take Donald Trump. They'll take Bush. They'll take Rubio. Hell, they would have taken anybody, but not Cruz. Because he's the anti-socialist. He's the anti-totalitarian. Notice when he speaks, he doesn't say, when I'm president, I'm going to make sure everybody has health care. Or when I'm president, I'm going to make sure everybody has a job. You know who that sounds like to me? Remember Huey Long, who was the governor of Louisiana? Guy ruled like a dictator. And it also sounds like Fidel Castro. No, I'm not comparing him to Fidel Castro. I'm making a point. It's a mindset. This is supposed to be a republic. And we're losing it. And there are very few people who will stand up to this. For years now, I've told you, if you're 50 or 45 and under, you have not had an opportunity to vote for a conservative for president of the United States because the Republican Party won't nominate one. They've given us Dole and Bush and McCain and Romney, and they don't want to give you one again. And that includes our friends at the Fox News Channel, who pretty much are surrogates for the Republican establishment. Look, I'm not attacking. I'm just explaining. You can't watch it and listen to it and not realize it. Donald Trump is on there day in and day out. He's on there more than Karl Rove. A couple of weeks ago, it was Marco Rubio who was on there day in and day out. Before that, it was Chris Christie. Before that, it was Jeb Bush. But who is not on there day in and day out? They even put Ben Carson on there day in and day out as long as he was attacking Ted Cruz. Then they wanted to give him voice. Where is he today? He's not on Fox. No, I'm not endorsing candidates. I'm just explaining things. I am a conservative, a constitutional conservative, and I was that before I ever knew Ted Cruz or Donald Trump or anybody else. And I will continue to be that till the day I die. I'll be right back.